to his sleeping, to his sitting, probably also to his standing, probably to his breathing, right? And Acharya Mun at one point communicates directly with this Naga to tell him this attitude he has of always finding fault with others not only creates suffering for others, creating a negative relationship, but creates tremendous amount of dukkha for himself, even creating the conditions for being reborn in the hells. And so I wanted to finish this entry because I felt this is a very rich entry, very applicable to our lives. And we can see this Naga's struggle with his own fault-finding mind. So the Naga replies back. I read this before, but it's worth repeating. So Naga says, "My heart enjoys finding fault with you all the time, even though you've done nothing wrong. That's just the way my heart is. I don't know how to convince myself of the harmful effects of this tendency so that I can correct it and practice the way of virtue from now on." The Naga is stuck in his habits of fault finding. And he's being corrected by Acharya Mun. He has a kind of a wholesome direction. But he goes, I just don't know how I can do it. My mind, my heart, my habits are so deep. Can I really change? So Acharya Mun basically tells him to pay careful consideration of cause and effect. Right? When you do this, what are the effects? And when you do goodness, what are the effects? He tries to teach him how to go towards the good. So at the conclusion of Acharya Mun's remarks, the Naga promised to make an effort to follow Acharya Mun's advice. In the days that followed, Acharya Mun kept an eye as he continued with his own practice. He noticed some improvement as the Naga was able to restrict its hypercritical tendencies by exercising some measure of control over them. But he also noticed that this effort caused the Naga much consternation. So finding some excuse to leave the cave, he moved on, which pleased the Naga. His association with it ended there. So Naga tried. But as we know, when we start to work against our bad habits, it's not easy to change. And oftentimes it creates what seems to be more tension, more affliction. So in this sense, Acharya Mun graciously left because he didn't want to create this kind of constant anxiety for this Naga. From that time on, Acharya Mun alluded to this story as a means of elaborating on various aspects of human nature for the personal benefit of those listening. The gist of what he said is worth repeating here, hopefully so that the reader can learn some valuable lessons from his teaching. So Acharya Mun now is teaching the monks using this story. He explained that good and evil do not arise on their own, but are dependent on habitual ways of behaving that gradually become part of one's character. If our tendency is to do evil, it is very difficult to remedy because everything we do tends to flow in that direction. If it is our tendency to do good, we become more and more skillful and assertive as we progress in that direction. For this reason, wise parents will try to train their children in the way of goodness from a very early age, before it becomes too late. When necessary, they will entrust them to the care of someone who is suitably supportive, so their children's upbringing is not left to chance. Right, so if you just imagine for ourselves, what was our childhood like? What were the habits that we learned? Children began to learn about basic common principles from a very tender age. But unlike learning in the classroom, this learning process is not interrupted by time or season. Such basic common principles are more firmly implanted in children's characters than any of their school subjects, for these things exist all around them, at home, in school, and everywhere else. Children are constantly taking lessons from what they see, hear, taste, smell, and touch in the world, remembering well what they had learned. A child's senses are its natural blackboard. The impressions imprinted there are pregnant with moral significance, that is, matters of good and evil. They constantly pick up impressions from their playmates and the adults in their lives, as well as from movies, entertainment, and so forth. Such everyday impressions are a child's true teachers, and children are all too willing to learn new ideas that are constantly conveyed to them. Contact with evil affairs can definitely induce them to follow evil ways, while good influences can definitely induce them to follow the path of virtue. Children naturally take these things and see and hear as examples to emulate, and over time this establishes a pattern of behavior that defines a child's character. Once these patterns become ingrained, the children will speak and act according to the good or evil orientation thus established. The fact that some people readily take satisfaction in doing evil and are unwilling to change, while others are readily able to take satisfaction in doing good and cherish virtue, indicates the fundamental importance of character development. Those left to their own devices easily abandon the effort to resist their bad tendencies, even before they have seen enough satisfactory results to encourage perseverance. Consequently, basic character development is absolutely essential for everyone. This means that nothing should be done carelessly or thoughtlessly, for when such tendencies become habitual, that they are difficult to correct. When I say nothing should be done, I'll add that to our thoughts. Right? We shouldn't just have our mind wander off and start complaining or start criticizing, carelessly or thoughtlessly, because this begins to plant the habitual patterns that we have to then receive the retribution for. The importance of this principle becomes apparent as we strive to develop positive character traits until they become part of our very nature. For instance, being reasonable about how and where we travel, being reasonable about how we spend our money so that everyone in the family benefits, and being reasonable in our eating and sleeping habits so that we do not overindulge in all of them. All such exemplary behavior patterns should be enthusiastically developed until they become instinctive. The inner resistance we meet in the early stages of training will naturally give way to a smooth, easy character transformation. This transformation itself is sufficient proof that character training is well within our capacities, but we must be willing to persevere in the beginning. Setting a new habit is not easy. Training is required to make any kind of work successful. Just as we must undergo training in order to succeed in our professions, so the heart and mind must be trained in order to obtain optimum results. Only after death are we beyond the need for training. Wishing to gain proficiency in something, we must work at it, practicing until we are skilled in it. Character training develops a skill which is synonymous with virtue. Take this message to heart, consider it well, and put it into practice. Your efforts will surely be rewarded with a wealth of personal virtue. Such was the gist of Acharya Mun's teaching on character training. I've included it here to help those who are developing Dhamma in this way. So I felt this was a very valuable teaching, especially for us in the monastery, because we often felt this, say that this monastic form is a training. And this training has a beginning, has a middle, has an end, or from the Buddha kind of Mahayana perspective, there is no beginning, middle, and end. It's something we do for all time and all places. But I was just going to share maybe one reflection that I think is actually quite interesting, using this Naga's story as an example, which is a principle that we often talk about, which is that There's different ways of approaching life. One is called plan and execute, or plan and control. Another one is search and amplify. We discussed this in our interactions with service space. And I would also maybe say another way of saying it is, one is a mindset of deserving, and one is a mindset of serving. So how does this work? Oftentimes in the world, we develop a mindset where we have an idea of how things are supposed to be. And then we try to control everything to match how things are supposed to be from our mind. And what ends up happening is a lot of affliction, a lot of fault finding. So imagine this hypercritical Naga. He has an idea of how things are supposed to be, and then he just criticizes everything when it doesn't match, and a lot of affliction. But if you were to have a different mindset, which we said search and amplify, search is, can we find the goodness in other people and really support it, amplify it? Be a completely different mindset. So he would, this Naga in this cave, would be able to see Acharya Mun practicing, and rather than criticizing him, he would be rejoicing, saying, wow, wonderful. Such a wonderful monk practicing. How can I support him? And then the goodness that Acharya Mun is practicing becomes part of the Naga as well. But we saw it in the story that because the Naga was so critical, he couldn't rejoice in Acharya Mun's practice. And he couldn't even receive the dedication of goodness. He rejected it because of his critical mindset. So search and amplify. Or from a mindset of deserving to serving is oftentimes we criticize the world because we feel like we deserve better. You know, I'm somehow special or important, and these things are below me. These things aren't functioning the way I think they're supposed to be. Or this is wasting my time. Really? This is wasting your time? Wasting my time? Right? Just think about that. That mindset is so painful. Somehow this moment of existence that we're in can be a waste. That we see our life as something that is constantly being compared, almost like a commodity. It's like, no, every moment of our life is precious. If we can bring this sense of awareness and clarity and kindness, every moment is priceless. And so that's why I say from this mindset of deserving, we go to a mindset of serving. So if we see something that could be done maybe more skillfully, or in our heart we go, so how can I be of service? How can I amplify, care for, joyfully support the goodness that's here? And be very careful and circumspect to protect, to prevent any harm from happening. That becomes our inner orientation. So I think this is really important because so much times, at least for me, I just catch myself just getting caught up in this mind of plan and control, or thinking that I somehow deserve better. And it's like, that's just the mindset of suffering. Rather, what if we were to look at the world and to see where is the goodness and how can I amplify it? And rather than coming from a mind of deserving, say, how can I truly be of service? Okay, so maybe just that much for this morning. We now 3 steps, 1 bow.